The literary power of Japan's Heian period. Picture a world where poetry could determine your political future, where a single misplaced word in a love letter could end your career, and where the most powerful person in the land might be a novelist. This isn't fantasy. This was reality in Japan's Heian period, an age so magnificent yet so little known in the West that it might as well be a lost civilization. While most Americans associate ancient Japan with samurai and shogun, there was an earlier golden age that shaped Japanese culture more profoundly than any other, an era when art, not the sword, ruled supreme. The year is 794 CE. As Europe struggles through the Dark Ages, a new city rises in Japan. Heian-kyo, modern-day Kyoto, gleams with freshly lacquered pavilions and meticulously planned boulevards. This is no ordinary capital. It's a perfect square, modeled after the Chinese capital of Chang'an, but with a distinctly Japanese soul. Every detail, from the orientation of its streets to the placement of its temples, follows precise cosmic principles. But what makes this period truly extraordinary isn't its architecture. It's what happened inside those elegant buildings. Imagine a society where men wrote their letters in careful calligraphy on paper infused with burning incense, where the color combination of your clothes could make or break your reputation, and where the ability to compose an impromptu poem could determine whether you got the job. This was the world of the Heian nobility, and at its heart was a system of aesthetic sophistication that would put today's social media influencers to shame. The stakes were incredibly high. One's political future could literally depend on the elegance of one's handwriting or the clever turn of phrase in a poem. Take, for example, the story of Kino Tsurayuki, a court noble who once saved his career through a single poem. During a heated political debate, instead of arguing, he composed an elegant verse that so perfectly captured the essence of the issue that his opponents were moved to tears. In the Heian period, this wasn't just showing off. It was power in its purest form. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this era was its treatment of women. While medieval Europe largely relegated women to the margins of cultural life, Heian Japan saw the rise of female authors and artists who created works that would shape world literature. Chief among them was Murasaki Shikibu, whose masterpiece, The Tale of Genji, isn't just the world's first novel. It's a psychological thriller, a political drama, and a romance that rivals anything on Netflix. Murasaki wrote her tale while serving as a lady-in-waiting at the imperial court, observing the intricate dance of power, love, and betrayal that played out daily around her. The Tale of Genji follows the life of a handsome prince and his romantic adventures, but it's really a mirror reflecting the sophisticated, and sometimes dangerous, world of the Heian court. Think of it as House of Cards meets Pride and Prejudice, but set in classical Japan. The novel's hero, Prince Genji, navigates a world where political alliances are formed through marriage, where love affairs can topple governments, and where the subtle art of writing the perfect morning-after letter is as important as managing state affairs. But here's what makes this period truly remarkable for modern viewers. The Heian nobility developed a culture of refinement and sensitivity that feels surprisingly relevant today. They were obsessed with self-presentation, social status, and the power of artistic expression. Sound familiar? Their world was one where appearance and reality often diverged, where social media-like networks of gossip and influence determined one's fate, and where the ability to project the right image could make or break you. Consider their approach to beauty and fashion. Heian nobles didn't just throw on whatever was clean. Their clothing choices were a complex language. A woman's 12-layered ceremonial robe, junihito, wasn't just clothing. Each layer had to harmonize in color and pattern, creating a symphony of silk that told observers everything from the wearer's taste level to their knowledge of classical poetry. But beneath this glittering surface of poetry and perfume lay a world of ruthless political ambition. And no family mastered this game better than the Fujiwara clan. Think of them as the Medicis of medieval Japan, but with an even more ingenious strategy for maintaining power. They literally married their way to the top. The Fujiwara's master stroke? They systematically married their daughters to emperors and then positioned themselves as grandfathers and regents to child emperors. It was perhaps history's most successful example of playing the long game. Imagine being so powerful that you could retire to a Buddhist monastery and still pull all the political strings of an empire. Take Fujiwara no Michinaga, the family's most successful power broker. He was never emperor, but he didn't need to be. With his daughters married to emperors and his grandsons on the throne, he wielded more real power than any emperor of his time. He once famously wrote a poem that translates roughly as, "This world, I think, is indeed my world, like the full moon shining over the earth." But the Fujiwara weren't content with just political power. They transformed it into art. Their mansions became centers of cultural life where poetry competitions could determine political alliances and where a well-timed literary reference could be as effective as a military campaign. They understood something that modern politicians are just beginning to grasp. Cultural power can be more lasting than political power. Consider the case of Sei Shonagon, author of The Pillow Book. As a lady-in-waiting at the imperial court, she created what might be called the world's first blog, a brilliant, witty collection of observations, lists, and court gossip that gives us an insider's view of Heian power politics. Her sharp tongue and sharper pen made her both celebrated and feared. Think of her as a cross between a courtier and a social media influencer, but with the power to make or break careers through her writings. The Heian period also saw the development of a unique form of power play through art and architecture. The positioning of buildings, the design of gardens, even the arrangement of screens and curtains within rooms. Everything was calculated to create specific impressions and advantages. A noble might spend a fortune creating the perfect garden, not just for aesthetic pleasure, but because it could serve as a stage for political theater. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Heian power politics was the role of supernatural beliefs in governance. The imperial court maintained an entire bureau of onmyoji, a kind of cross between astronomers, diviners, and feng shui practitioners, who determined everything from the most auspicious days for ceremonies to the proper directional taboos for travel. Imagine the CIA combined with astrology, and you'll get some idea of their influence. These onmyoji weren't just fortune tellers, they were power brokers in their own right. The most famous, Abe no Saimei, became so legendary that people still visit his shrine in Kyoto today. He was said to be able to control the weather, detect conspiracies through divination, and even battle evil spirits. In the Heian period, supernatural power was political power. The sophistication of Heian culture extended even to its approach to scandal and intrigue. When rivalries erupted, they weren't settled with swords, but with carefully orchestrated social humiliations. A rival might be ruined not by violence, but by being caught wearing an unfashionable color combination, or by failing to recognize a classical poetry reference at a crucial moment. Consider the story of the Screens of the Four Seasons incident, where a single badly chosen painting at a court ceremony led to a minister's political downfall. The art wasn't just bad, it violated subtle rules of seasonal representation that any cultured person was expected to know. It would be like a modern politician committing career suicide through an embarrassing social media post, but with even more elaborate rules of etiquette. Even love affairs were political acts. A nobleman's romantic adventures weren't just personal matters. They were moves in a complex game of alliance building and influence peddling. The morning after letter was particularly crucial. Its paper, ink, calligraphy, choice of poetry, and even the scent it was perfumed with could either enhance or destroy political careers. But like all golden ages, the Heian period couldn't last forever. As the centuries wore on, cracks began to appear in this exquisite cultural facade. The very refinement that made Heian culture so extraordinary would ultimately contribute to its downfall. While the nobility was perfecting the art of writing the perfect poem, a new class of provincial warriors was rising to power. These proto-samurai weren't interested in the subtle shadings of seasonal references or the proper way to layer silk robes. They were practical men who valued military prowess over poetic ability. Think of it as the revenge of the jocks over the art kids, but with potentially deadly consequences. The decline of the Heian period reads like a cautionary tale about the dangers of becoming too removed from reality. As the nobility became increasingly focused on aesthetic pursuits and court intrigues, they gradually lost touch with the practical aspects of governing. The provinces began to slip from their control, and local warrior families started to build their own power bases. Yet even as their political power waned, the cultural achievements of the Heian period were becoming permanently woven into the fabric of Japanese civilization. The aesthetic principles they developed, mono no aware, the pathos of things, miyabi, elegance and refinement, and aware, sensitivity to beauty, would influence Japanese art and literature for the next 1,000 years. Consider how these concepts still shape modern Japan. When you see Japanese people gathering to view cherry blossoms, they're participating in a tradition that was codified during the Heian period. The emphasis on seasonal awareness, the attention to subtle detail in presentation, the importance of proper form in social interactions. All these quintessentially Japanese traits can be traced back to Heian culture. The tale of Genji, written over 1,000 years ago, continues to influence storytelling worldwide. Its psychological insight, its complex characters, and its sophisticated narrative techniques pioneered elements that we now take for granted in modern novels. It's been called the world's first novel, but it might be more accurate to call it the world's first psychological thriller. Even the way modern Japanese write love letters or formal correspondence shows traces of Heian influence. The careful attention to proper paper, the importance of handwriting, the seasonal references, these aren't just quaint customs, they're living links to this remarkable period of history. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Heian period is its demonstration that power doesn't always come from the barrel of a gun. In an age when most societies were dominated by military might, the Heian Japanese created a civilization where cultural sophistication was the primary source of social status and political influence. It's a lesson that remains relevant today as nations increasingly compete through soft power rather than military force. The end of the Heian period wasn't marked by a single dramatic event, but rather by a gradual shift in power from the sophisticated but politically ineffective court nobility to the provincial warrior class. By 1185, when the first shogunate was established, the Golden Age was officially over. Yet in many ways, it never really ended. The aesthetic and cultural values developed during the Heian period continued to influence Japanese society even under warrior rule. The samurai might have held political power, but they still felt compelled to study classical poetry and master the arts of refinement that the Heian nobles had perfected. It was as if the conquered had culturally conquered their conquerors. Today, when you visit modern Kyoto, you can still walk the same grid pattern of streets laid out in 794. The imperial palace may be gone, but the aesthetic principles developed by Heian nobles continue to influence everything from Japanese garden design to the arrangement of traditional rooms. Their world lives on in countless subtle ways, waiting to be rediscovered by those who know where to look. The Heian period stands as a reminder that there are different ways to measure the greatness of a civilization. While other societies were building ever larger empires through military might, Heian Japan was creating an empire of aesthetic refinement and emotional sensitivity that would influence culture for centuries to come. As we face our own challenges in balancing power, culture, and governance, perhaps we have something to learn from this remarkable period when poetry could change politics, when beauty was a source of power, and when the subtle shading of an emotion could matter more than the sharp edge of a sword. Thank you for watching this exploration of Japan's lost golden age. If you've enjoyed discovering this fascinating period of history, please consider subscribing to our channel for more insights into Japan's rich cultural heritage. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with others who might be interested in discovering this remarkable chapter of human civilization. Remember, the next time you hear someone talk about ancient Japan being all about samurai and warfare, you can tell them about this extraordinary age when the pen was mightier than the sword, and when writing a perfect poem could change the course of history.